Last winter, I pulled fresh carrots, spinach, and kale out of my garden beds in mid-January when the thermometer read 11 degrees Fahrenheit, using structures that cost me less than $40 each to build. No electricity, no greenhouse heater, no grow lights plugged into anything, just glass, wood, composted manure, and a method that Depression-era homesteaders used when failure meant your family did not eat until spring. My neighbor down the road spent over $1,400 on a heated greenhouse setup last year, complete with thermostat-controlled fans and backup propane. An ice storm knocked out his power for 4 days in February, and he lost nearly everything inside. That is the difference between a system that depends on the grid and one that depends on biology. One fails when the world gets hard. The other was designed for when the world gets hard. Here is what nobody in the modern gardening industry wants you to think about. Before rural electrification reached most of America, before plastic film existed, before propane was piped to rural homes, millions of families grew and harvested fresh food straight through winters that would flatten an unprotected garden overnight. They did not have money for equipment. What they had was knowledge, adapted from European intensive market gardeners who had been doing this for centuries. And that knowledge did not fade because it stopped working. It faded because the industries selling heated greenhouses, season extenders, and out-of-season produce at the grocery store had no reason to keep it alive. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how those homesteaders kept plants producing through brutal winters using 5 specific techniques you can set up this fall for almost nothing. These are methods that maintain soil temperatures above freezing even when outside air drops well below zero. And stay with me to the end, because I will share a technique involving fresh livestock manure that generates its own steady heat for up to 90 days straight. No fuel required, just decomposition biology that was once common knowledge on every small farm in America. Most modern gardening books will not even mention it. Let me start with how I got this wrong for a very long time. I spent the better part of 15 years convinced that winter gardening required serious infrastructure. I bought row cover fabric, heavy gauge plastic sheeting, heat mats, even a small portable greenhouse I anchored to the south side of my house. Every year I would spend hundreds of dollars and dozens of hours trying to push the season. And every year I lost at least half of what I planted to cold snaps, condensation rot, or soil that just froze solid beneath my coverings. I figured winter growing was a rich person's hobby, something for people with real greenhouses and climate control systems. If you have been down that same road, spending money on products that promise season extension and getting mediocre results, you are not doing anything wrong. I was right there with you. The problem was not effort or investment. The problem was that I was trying to fight winter with technology instead of working with the thermal properties of the earth itself. Then my Amish neighbor Daniel showed me something in his garden that completely reset how I thought about cold. Here is what I uncovered once I started digging into the history. In the 1800s, on the outskirts of Paris, a group of market gardeners known as maraîchers developed what historians now call French intensive methods. These were not wealthy landowners. These were working families farming small plots, some less than an acre, who needed to supply fresh produce to Parisian markets year-round, including through winters where temperatures regularly dropped into the teens. They figured out that by combining glass cloches, stone thermal mass, strategic south-facing orientation, and composting horse manure as a biological heat source, they could maintain growing temperatures in their beds even in January. A study published by the Royal Horticultural Society in the 1970s confirmed that these French intensive beds could keep root zone temperatures between 40 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit when ambient air was well below freezing. No external energy, just physics and biology stacked in the right order. These were not romantic methods. These were survival strategies developed by people who lost income if their crops died. When millions of Americans found themselves in similar desperate circumstances during the 1930s, they adapted these same principles using whatever materials they had. Glass from broken windows, scrap lumber, manure from their own livestock, stone and brick from demolished buildings. That knowledge was common on small homesteads through the 1940s. Then cheap energy, commercial greenhouses, and year-round grocery supply supply chains made it seem unnecessary. But unnecessary and ineffective are not the same thing. Let me show you exactly how to rebuild these systems in your own garden. Here is what you need to understand before you build anything. Everything starts with site selection, and Depression-era homesteaders were ruthlessly strategic about this. They did not place their winter-growing beds wherever there was open space. They placed them against the south-facing wall of their house, barn, or any solid structure. Why does this matter so much? A south-facing wall does two things that no freestanding structure in the middle of your yard can do. First, it absorbs solar radiation all day and radiates that stored heat back toward your plants at night. A stone or brick wall that has been in full sun will radiate measurable warmth for 6 to 8 hours after sunset. University of Minnesota Extension research has documented that soil temperatures within 3 feet of a south-facing masonry wall can be 8 to 12 degrees warmer than soil in an open field on the same property. Second, the wall blocks prevailing north and northwest winds, which are the primary killers of winter plants. Wind chill does not just affect your skin, it strips heat from soil and plant tissue at a dramatically accelerated rate. Placing your winter bed tight against that south wall, ideally within 18 to 24 inches, cuts wind exposure by as much as 70%. If you do not have a masonry wall, a wooden structure still provides significant wind protection and some thermal benefit. Even a solid fence works. The key is south-facing orientation with wind blockage from the north. In zones 3 through 5, this single decision where you put the bed makes the difference between a system that works and one that fails before December. Now, here is where we actually start building, and this is the part that surprises most people because of how simple it is. The core structure those homesteaders used was what we now call a cold frame. But their version was not the flimsy plastic top boxes you see at garden centers. Theirs were built for survival. You need 4 things: scrap lumber or hay bales for the walls, old window sashes or storm door glass for the top, at least 6 inches of aged compost beneath your growing bed, and enough dried leaves or straw to pack around the outside. Build a rectangular frame against your south-facing wall. The back wall, which sits against the structure, should be 14 to 18 inches tall. The front wall should be 8 to 10 inches tall. This angle, critical for function, tilts the glass top toward the winter sun at roughly 30 to 45 degrees, which maximizes solar gain during the low-angle months of December through February. For dimensions, a 4-foot by 8-foot frame is ideal for a family of 2 to 4. You can build it from reclaimed 2 by 12 lumber, stacked hay bales, or even cinder blocks. Depression-era families used whatever was free. The walls are not just structure, they are insulation. Hay bale walls provide an R value of roughly 28, which is better than most home wall insulation. For the glass top, old storm windows are perfect and often available free from renovation projects. Glass transmits solar radiation more efficiently than plastic and does not degrade in ultraviolet light. A single layer of glass over a properly built cold frame can raise interior temperatures 20 to 30 degrees above outside air during daylight hours. On a sunny 20-degree day, the inside of your cold frame will reach 45 to 50 degrees, which is well within the growing range for cold-hardy crops. Now, I want to pause here for a moment because what I have shown you so far, the site selection and the basic cold frame, that is really just the entry point into a much larger system. Now, what I'm showing you today is just one piece of a much bigger picture. The Amish don't do anything in isolation. Every technique connects to a whole system, and that system is what makes the difference between a garden that struggles and a garden that practically takes care of itself. I spent years learning how it all fits together. And I've put everything into a step-by-step guide called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. It's got the complete 5 defense layers, the companion planting charts, the 4-bed crop rotation, all of it laid out day by day, so you're never guessing what to do next. If you want to go deeper than what we can cover in one video, there are 2 easy ways to get it. You can click the link right down there in the description below this video, or If you're watching this on your TV or your computer, just grab your phone, open up the camera, and point it at the QR code on screen right now. It'll take you straight to the guide. No searching, no typing anything in. All right, let's keep going. Here is where most people stop, and here's where those homesteaders were just getting started. A cold frame alone will protect plants down to about 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you live anywhere in zones 3 through 6, you know that is not enough. You will see nights that drop well below zero. The homesteaders solved this with thermal mass, and their approach was brilliantly simple. Inside your cold frame, before you add any soil, line the back wall with dark-colored stone. Brick or even gallon jugs filled with water. These dense materials absorb heat during the day when the sun is streaming through the glass and release it slowly at night. A row of 5 one-gallon water jugs painted flat black and placed along the north interior wall of your cold frame will stabilize nighttime temperatures by an additional 5 to 10 degrees. That does not sound dramatic until you realize it is the difference between 28 degrees and 18 degrees inside your frame, which is the difference between living spinach and dead spinach. Stone and brick work even better for long-term heat storage. If you can lay a row of salvage bricks along the back interior wall, each brick absorbs roughly 1 British thermal unit per pound per degree of temperature rise during the day and releases it through the night. A 40-pound row of bricks absorbs and releases meaningful heat for 8 to 10 hours. But what about the soil itself? This is the part the Depression era families understood better than almost anyone since. The ground beneath your cold frame is not just growing medium, it is a massive thermal battery. The earth 4 feet below the surface stays between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round in most of the continental United States. Your job is not to heat the soil, your job is to stop the cold air from stealing the heat the soil already has. This brings us to the insulation layer, and this technique alone saved more winter gardens during the Depression than any other single practice. Once your cold frame is built, pack the outside walls with 12 to 18 inches of dried leaves, straw, or hay. Mound it all the way up to the glass line. This exterior insulation blanket prevents heat from escaping through the wooden walls. On the coldest nights, homesteaders would lay an old horse blanket, a piece of carpet, or even burlap sack stuffed with straw over the glass itself, creating a double insulation layer. Glass plus blanket that held interior temperatures above freezing even when the air outside hit -10. The timing here matters. You want this insulation in place by mid-November in zones 3 through 5 and by early December in zones 6 and 7. Do not wait for the first hard freeze. The goal is to bank heat in the soil before the deep cold arrives, not to play catch up after it does. Now, let me show you exactly what to plant inside these structures, because variety selection is where I see the most wasted effort. Not every vegetable survives winter growing, and the Depression era families knew exactly which ones were worth their limited space. Here is the principle. You are not trying to grow summer crops in winter. You are growing cold adapted varieties that actually improve in flavor after frost exposure. When temperatures drop below freezing, certain plants convert stored starches into sugars as a biological antifreeze response. This is why winter harvested carrots and kale taste noticeably sweeter than anything you pull in September. Your top tier performers, the ones that survive for Depression era families in zones as cold as 3, are these. Spinach, specifically Bloomsdale longstanding or winter giant varieties, which tolerate temperatures down to 15 degrees and actually grow slowly through winter inside a cold frame. Kale, particularly winter boar or dwarf blue curled, which can survive single-digit temperatures and produces harvestable leaves all winter. Carrots, specifically Napoli or Mokum, which you plant in August, let size up through fall, and then harvest straight from the cold frame through January and February. Mache, also called corn salad, which is virtually indestructible in cold weather and was a staple of both French market gardens and American homestead plots. Your second tier includes Claytonia, also known as miner's lettuce, tatsoi, and certain varieties of Swiss chard like Ford Hook Giant. These tolerate the mid-20s inside of frame, but may show damage below 20 degrees. Here is what to avoid. Do not waste your cold frame space on lettuce varieties bred for summer, tomatoes, peppers, or beans. I made this mistake my first 3 winters. I kept trying to force warm season crops into a cold frame and wondering why they turned to mush. It is not about fighting nature. It is about working with it. Plant your cold frame crops in late August through mid-September, depending on your zone. You want them well established with strong root systems before the first frost. The plants will slow their above ground growth dramatically as daylight decreases below 10 hours, but their roots keep working and the leaves stay alive and harvestable. Think of a cold frame garden not as an active growing system in winter, but as a living refrigerator that keeps your harvest fresh in the ground until you need it. Now, I want to walk you through the daily routine because this is where I see people either succeed or abandon their winter garden out of frustration, and honestly, it is far simpler than you might expect. The single most important task is venting. On any sunny day when the interior temperature of your cold frame rises above 55 degrees, you must prop open the glass lid 2 to 4 inches. A simple stick or a brick works fine. Depression-era families check their frames every morning as part of their daily chores. If you skip this on a sunny January afternoon, interior temperatures can spike above 80 degrees and cook your plants faster than any freeze would kill them. Close the lid before sunset to trap the day's heat. That is the rhythm. Open in the morning on sunny days, close before dark. On overcast days below 40 degrees, leave it shut. On the coldest nights, add your blanket or carpet over the glass. Remove it each morning. That is the entire routine. 5 minutes a day. Watering is minimal. The closed environment of a cold frame retains moisture far better than an open bed. Check soil moisture every 7 to 10 days by pressing your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it feels like a wrung out sponge, leave it alone. If it feels dry, water lightly with room temperature water, never ice cold, and only in the morning, so excess moisture can evaporate before nightfall. Excess moisture at night is the #1 killer of cold frame crops. Not cold, but fungal disease from damp, stagnant air. Now let me talk about some patterns I see that quietly undermine winter gardens, because I made every one of these mistakes myself. The first pattern is waiting too long to plant. Most people hear winter gardening and think they should plant in October or November. By then, you have already lost the game. Your cold hardy crops need 6 to 8 weeks of growing time before the first hard frost to establish root systems strong enough to survive. In zone 5, that means seeds in the ground by late August. In zone 7, you have until mid-September. Every week you delay past that window cuts your winter harvest significantly. Depression-era families planted their cold frame crops on a strict calendar because they could not afford to guess. The second pattern is relying on plastic instead of glass. I used plastic sheeting over my cold frames for years because it was cheaper and lighter. The problem is that plastic creates extreme temperature swings far more than glass. It heats up fast and loses heat fast. It also traps condensation against plant leaves, creating the exact damp conditions that breed botrytis and downy mildew. Glass moderates temperature changes, allows better light transmission, and sheds condensation more effectively. There is a reason every surviving photograph of Depression-era cold frames shows glass, not plastic. They learned the hard way too. The third pattern is sealing the frame too tight. This one got me for years. I thought the goal was to trap every bit of heat, so I caulked every seam and never opened the lid unless it was above 50 degrees outside. My crops rotted from the inside out. Cold hardy plants need air circulation to prevent disease. Even on cold days, a 1/4-inch gap at the back of the lid allows enough air exchange to prevent the stagnant humidity that kills winter greens. The homesteaders knew this. Their frames were built from rough lumber with natural gaps. Those gaps were not flaws. They were features. The fourth pattern is neglecting the soil beneath the frame. If you build a cold frame over the same compacted, nutrient-depleted soil you have been gardening in all summer, your winter crops will struggle no matter how good your structure is. Before planting, work in 4 to 6 inches of finished compost and make sure the bed drains well. Cold, waterlogged soil is a death sentence for root crops. The Depression-era families rotated their cold frame beds just like their field crops, and they always amended with manure compost before. fall planting. Now here is the technique I promised you at the beginning. This is the one that transformed my winter garden from a modest success into something that genuinely stunned me when I saw the results. It is called a hotbed, and it was standard practice on Depression-era homesteads, borrowed directly from those French market gardeners I mentioned earlier. The principle is simple and backed by modern composting science. Fresh livestock manure, particularly horse manure mixed with straw bedding, generates significant heat as it decomposes. Research from Cornell University's composting program has documented that a properly built manure bed reaches internal temperatures between 120 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit within days of construction, and it sustains usable heat output for 60 to 90 days. Here is exactly how to build one. Dig out your cold frame bed to a depth of 18 to 24 inches. Fill the bottom 12 to 14 inches with fresh horse manure mixed roughly 50-50 with straw or dried leaves. Pack it down firmly, water it until it is thoroughly moist but not dripping, and cover it with 4 to 6 inches of finished compost or good garden soil. Put your glass lid on and wait 3 to 4 days. When you push a thermometer into the manure layer, it will read between 100 and 140 degrees. Wait until it drops to around 85 to 90 degrees before planting, which usually takes 7 to 10 days. From that point forward, the decomposing manure will keep your root zone between 50 and 70 degrees for the next 2 to 3 months, even as outside temperatures plummet. I built my first hotbed 3 winters ago after Daniel described the ones his grandfather maintained during the Depression. That January, the air temperature hit -4 degrees. The soil inside my hotbed cold frame was 51 degrees. I harvested spinach and radishes on the same day my neighbor was scraping ice off his windshield. This is the knowledge that was nearly lost, not because it failed, but because it was replaced by products you had to buy. Now, what I've shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it's still just one piece. If you're tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, then I'd really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It's called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, and it's everything I've learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It's got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold, and it includes a companion planting field guide so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you'll see it. The second way, if you're watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you're going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it'll bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it's the best investment you can make in your garden this year. You know, those Depression-era homesteaders did not think of themselves as doing anything remarkable. They were just feeding their families with what they had: a south-facing wall, some scrap glass, a pile of manure, and the stubborn refusal to let winter win. That same stubbornness is in every one of us who keeps showing up in the garden. If you try any of these methods this fall, I would love to hear how it goes. Drop a comment and let me know what you are building. I'll see you in the next one.